Ladies and gentlemen, Brendan Brown.
Welcome to today's LinkedIn Speaker Series. Give yourselves a round of applause for being here today. And welcome to everyone on the stream, as well as the people in the room here in Sunnyvale. For those that aren't aware, the LinkedIn Speaker Series happens about once a month. And it's an opportunity for us to bring together speakers from across the world, from a variety of backgrounds, covering a range of topics from technology, innovation, social topics, pure inspiration, leadership, and it's a chance for people to come together to learn and gain some new perspective. We host here at LinkedIn. If you can't be here, you can join on the stream like we're doing here today. And if you want to check out any of our past speakers, you can go to our website and make sure I get this right. I think it's linkedin.speakers.com. Speakers.linkedin.com. Speakers.linkedin.com. So check it out. Lots of great past speakers are on there for you to take in on your own time. I am so excited to welcome Haben Girma to LinkedIn today. A little bit about who Haben is. She is a world-recognized leader around the topics of people with disabilities, diversity, using disability to drive innovation. She's someone who inspires wherever she goes. She is a White House honoree under the Obama administration. She's recognized on the Forbes 30 Under 30 list. She was recognized as part of the Black Girls Who Rock Awards for BET this year. And just noticed yesterday, she was recognized as one of the top 100 most influential Africans, along with some names that you definitely know, which is incredible. And a little bit about how I get to know Haben. So my name is Brendan Brown, and I head up our recruiting team. I'm also the executive sponsor of Enablin, which is our ERG. Round of applause for Enablin. I see some more people. Which is our employee resource group focused on people with disabilities. It's a topic that I'm personally and professionally passionate about. I have an 11-year-old son who was born profoundly deaf. So these are opportunities for me to bring together really who I am as a person, as a dad, as a partner, and as a professional. And I was, one morning about 2 years ago, doing what I usually do, which is come in, check out what's going on the LinkedIn feed, see what my network's talking about, what the hot topics are, and saw that Haben was being recognized under Obama as a White House honoree. I thought it was remarkable. The headline was Harvard Law's first deaf-blind graduate gets recognized, and my mind was just blown on many dimensions. So I do what I do when I moved like that, and I commented on this post and said, congratulations, Haben. Didn't know Haben at the time. And then within minutes, I get an email from a gentleman who I get to know because I'm a recruiter, and we interviewed him at LinkedIn. He didn't end up coming to work at LinkedIn, but someone I stayed in touch with. We say relationships matter here at LinkedIn. Candidate experience matters as well. But he pinged me and said, hey, I saw your comment on the post about Haben. Would you like to meet her? And I said, my goodness, I'd be honored to meet her. So he made the introduction, and we met over in our Mountain View office at the time, a couple of years ago. And it was an incredibly moving meeting, and really had to get my head around, wow, this is a relationship that could be so valuable for me. Immediately, I felt like Haben was someone who could mentor me on many, many topics across many, many dimensions. And then in my role as head of recruiting and my role as the executive sponsor of the ERG focused on these topics, we've been able to get her involved in things like take a look at our product from an accessibility point of view, meeting our executives over the past 6 months. She's helping us think through training for our hiring managers and just people across the company in general with a series called Let's Talk About Disabilities. So she's someone who has been absolutely instrumental for us to think about these topics differently, and definitely a testament to the fact that relationships do matter. So please welcome to the stage Haben Girma.
Good girl. Forward.
See.
Forward.
All right, before we get started, we have a tradition here at LinkedIn when we have folks join us on stage to share one thing that is not on their LinkedIn profile. So Haben, could you share one thing that is not on your LinkedIn profile?
Good morning, everyone. So I'll share one thing that's not on my LinkedIn profile. When I was in high school, I traveled to Mali in West Africa to help build a school. And when I say build a school, I literally mean build a school. We were out in the sun, sifting sand, making bricks, digging the latrine. It was very difficult work, but very rewarding to actually create a physical structure that will support education for kids in Africa. So that's one thing that I've done that's not on my profile.
That is a great story. Very, very cool. Take it away, Haben.
Thank you, Brendan. So my name is Haben Girma, and as you heard, I'm deaf-blind. Deaf-blind encompasses a spectrum of vision and hearing loss. There's lots of diversity in the disability community, and within various disability groups, there's also lots of diversity. One of the techniques I use for communicating with people is a digital braille display. One moment, my dog just switched positions. So for communication, I use a digital braille display. I'm holding it up. On the bottom are dots, and I run my finger over the dots to feel the letters. Braille is a tool that helps people who are blind access information. It's one of many tools. So I use my fingers to read the digital braille on this computer. And in the front row, Corey is typing on a QWERTY keyboard that's wirelessly connected to my braille display. And Corey transcribes visual and audio information that I then read in digital braille. So if the audience laughs, if people smile, if people fall asleep, Corey gives me all that information. That's one technique for accessing information. Disability is an opportunity to create new solutions. Oftentimes, people think of disability as a burden, as a problem. That's the dominant disability story, but we could shift that story. My name, Haben, comes from Eritrea. It's a small country in Northeast Africa. Ethiopia borders to the south, and to the north is the Red Sea. My mother grew up during the war. There were a lot of struggles, a lot of violence. Schools became a place where students can learn, and stories facilitated that learning. Stories are very powerful. My mother heard many stories. Some stories said America is the land of opportunity. America is the land of freedom. And those stories inspired her to take the dangerous journey to walk from Eritrea to Sudan. She was a refugee in Sudan for about 10 months, and then a refugee organization helped her come to the United States. Several years later, older, wiser, my mother realized it's not geography that creates justice. It's people that create justice. Communities create justice. All of us face the choice whether to tolerate injustice or advocate for equality for all. As the daughter of refugees, a Black woman, disabled, lots of stories say my life doesn't matter. I choose to create my own definitions. I choose to create my own story. And the story I choose says disability is an opportunity for solutions. I've developed lots of different solutions. You've heard one solution for communication. For traveling around, I can use a white cane, or I can work with a service dog. I have a guide dog named Maxine. She's been trained to go around obstacles, stop at corners, stop if there's oncoming traffic, So we work with this team, and that's one strategy. There's strategies for just about everything. For using computers, I use a smartphone, I use a Mac, and those are designed with accessibility, with software applications that allow blind individuals to connect to digital braille display, or if someone can hear, to listen to the computer and access information that way. So there are lots of alternative techniques. It's really a matter of communities choosing to be inclusive. Disability is never the barrier. Most barriers that exist are actually created by society. When I was in college, I asked myself, what can I do to make our world more accessible? What can I do to be the change I want to see in the world? I went to college at Lewis and Clark. It's a small college in Portland, Oregon. Sounds like there's some Oregonians in here. Lewis and Clark had a cafeteria that served as a central place for students to hang out, connect between classes. When you enter the cafeteria, along 3 of the walls are large windows showcasing Portland's rain. Along the 4th wall were food stations, and people would walk up to the cafeteria front door, browse a print menu, and then go to their station of choice. The menu was in print. Blind students like myself couldn't read that menu. Blindness wasn't the problem. The problem was the format of the menu. So I went to the cafeteria manager and I explained that I can't access the menu because of the format of the menu. Could they provide the menu in other formats, like Braille? Or they could email me the menu and I can access the email using my assistive technology on my computer, on my laptop. Or they could post the menu online. And if they did that, then everyone would be able to access it in advance. They don't have to be right at the cafeteria to learn about the food options. The cafeteria manager told me they're very busy. I should stop complaining and be more appreciative. But if there's chocolate cake at Station 4 and no one tells me, I'm not feeling appreciative. Back then, I was a vegetarian. It's hard to eat vegetarian when you don't know what the food choices are. Sometimes I would wait in line for 20 minutes, get food, find a table, try the food, and discover an unpleasant surprise. It was frustrating, but for the first few months, I told myself to just tolerate the situation. I told myself, at least I have food. Lots of people around the world struggle to gain access to food. Why should I complain? My mother, when she was my age, was a refugee in Sudan. And there I was in Oregon getting access to an education. Who was I to complain? Maybe the manager was right. Maybe I should stop complaining. I talked to my friends about the situation, and they reminded me it's my choice. It's our choice to accept unfairness or advocate for justice. I did some research, and I learned about the Americans with Disabilities Act. The ADA prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. Places of public accommodation, like the cafeteria, are required by law to ensure access. Armed with this new knowledge, I went back to the cafeteria manager and explained the Americans with Disabilities Act. I said, if they didn't provide reasonable accommodations, I'm going to sue. I had no idea how I would do that. I was 19. I couldn't afford a lawyer. Nowadays, I know that there are nonprofit law firms that will advocate for the rights of people with disabilities for free. Nowadays, I know I could have filed a complaint with the US Department of Education or Department of Justice. But back then, I didn't know any of that. All I knew is that I had to try. If I wanted the world to be more inclusive and accessible, I needed to advocate. I couldn't expect other people to do all the advocating. I had to advocate too. The following day, the manager apologized and agreed to make the menus accessible. And he actually did. They started emailing the menus, and I could read the emails on my computer and could make informed food choices. Navigating around the cafeteria was easy. I had training on how to use a white cane to navigate spaces. So if the menu said, Station 3, tortellini, I knew to go straight to Station 3. Having access to the menu, life became delicious. The following year, another blind student came to the college. He didn't have to advocate for access to the menu. The cafeteria immediately started providing access. I realized that when I advocate, it doesn't just help me, it also helps our whole community. And that experience inspired me to go to law school. In 2010, I entered Harvard Law as their first deafblind student. Harvard told me, we've never had a deafblind student before. And I told Harvard, I've never been to Harvard Law School before. We didn't know exactly what the solutions would be. There were many unknowns, but we engaged in an interactive process to find the solutions. We tried one thing. If it didn't work, we tried another thing. We used high expectations, creativity, patience, until we found all the solutions we needed. And in 2013, I graduated. Next slide. We have a photo from graduation. Dean Minnow is handing me my diploma. We're both wearing academic regalia. And my guide dog, Maxine, is wearing a fancy fur coat. What I just did is called an image description. And image descriptions help blind individuals gain access to photos. When you share photos on LinkedIn, on other places, remember to include image descriptions so that everyone can have access to the story. Image descriptions also include search engine optimization. When more text is associated with your content, more people can find your content. So it benefits everyone. So I graduated in 2013 and began working as a disability rights attorney. I helped teach organizations and individuals how to make our worlds more accessible for everyone. Inclusion is really a choice. I'm going to share a photo that demonstrates how inclusion is a choice. Next slide. We have a photo with President Obama standing at a table. He's typing on a QWERTY keyboard. I'm also standing at the table and I'm reading from a digital braille display. President Obama usually communicates by voice. When I met him, we explained that I'm deafblind and I access information best through text. So he graciously switched from voicing to typing so that he can connect and we can have a conversation. Access is a choice. When we choose to be inclusive, we also become role models and our communities see what we're doing and are inspired to follow us and also be inclusive. So that's another reason to choose inclusion. You become an advocate too and inspire those in your community to also choose inclusion. Inclusion comes in many forms. Another form of access for people with disabilities is sign language. Next slide. Deaf communities all over the world have developed sign languages. In the United States, the dominant language is American Sign Language. In France, it's French Sign Language. Across the pond, the Brits have a completely different language that makes no sense to me. They call it British Sign Language. This is actually a form of innovation. If you can't hear conversation, you can create visual conversation. Throughout our history, people with disabilities have been innovating solutions to all kinds of challenges. Sign language is a form of innovation. The deaf-blind community has developed tactile sign language. In this video, a young man is signing to me. I have my hands over his hands to feel his signs. That's called tactile sign language. And it's also a form of innovation. There's lots of different ways for people to connect and share information. Next slide. Another form of communication is dance. Here's a video with salsa dancing. And salsa dancing is similar to sign language in some sense, in that they're signals. They can be visual, they can be tactile. When I dance with people, they switch some of the visual signs to tactile signs so that I can feel them and access the music and access the dance. Some people might be skeptical that deaf-blind individuals could dance. If someone is deaf and sighted, they can see, they can watch the other dancers and see the beat by watching the other dancers. They also might watch the hands of the musicians and see the beat through the hands of the musicians. Someone who's blind and can hear the music and respond to the beat in the music. The way I access music is through dance, through partner dancing like salsa, swing, and other dances. I can dance in communities that choose to be inclusive. I've actually been denied access to various salsa communities for different reasons, all of them just coming down to people choosing not to be inclusive. I had a salsa place in DC deny me access because I have a service dog, and they said no dogs allowed. Under the Americans with Disabilities Act, service dogs are allowed to go anywhere the public can go. They're protected under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Some people don't know. So there's a lot of education that needs to happen to make sure that our communities are inclusive and that everyone has access. There are lots of good reasons to choose inclusion. Next slide. One of the reasons is you increase your reach. Throughout the world, there are 1.3 billion people with disabilities. That's a huge market. So when you make your services accessible, you get to tap into a larger market, which means more consumers, larger audience, and more revenue in the long run. Within the US, there are 57 million Americans with disabilities. Another reason is content discoverability. Image descriptions, for example, when you add image descriptions, you increase the text associated with your content, which makes it possible for more people to find your content, in addition to the blind community being able to access your content. When you add captions and transcripts to videos and podcasts, then you have more text associated with your content, which helps with content discoverability. It also helps with tapping into the deaf community and allowing your message to be shared within the deaf community. Facebook reports that adding captions to video actually increases the average view time of the video by about 12%. So there are good business reasons to include captions and transcripts with your content. Another reason is innovation. Disability drives innovation. Throughout our history, there are lots of examples of people with disabilities driving innovation. Oftentimes, we're hidden figures. Most people don't know about these stories. So we need to help get these stories out so that people start to realize that disability drives innovation. I'll share some examples. Back in 1808, there were two friends, one sighted, one blind, in Italy. They wanted to be able to send each other letters. Back then, this was before email, this was before Braille. If a blind person wanted to write a letter, they would voice their letter and someone else would write it down for them. These two friends couldn't do that. Their letters had to stay secret. They were love letters. So they decided to see this as a design opportunity. What can they do to create a system so that someone can produce a letter, a love letter, secretly without needing to ask someone else to write it down for them? And they ended up developing the first working typewriter. On a typewriter, you can press keys, memorize the layout of the keys, and produce print without requiring sight. Nowadays, lots of people type on keyboards, and some of the fastest typists are touch typists. So disability is an opportunity to develop new solutions. I'll give another example. Vint Cerf is one of the fathers of the internet. And before the internet existed as we know it today, deaf individuals struggled to find ways to communicate long distance. Vint Cerf himself is hearing impaired and his wife is also hearing impaired. So he was particularly interested in solutions that would help people communicate that didn't require hearing. He developed the earliest email protocol. And when you send messages through email, you get to communicate information without requiring people to strain to hear. Nowadays, lots of people use email. And this is another example of how disability drives innovation. If we're thoughtful and creative, disability challenges can help us come up with solutions that will become the next big thing. So see disability as an opportunity to create something new that'll benefit the entire community. So we just shared some great reasons to choose inclusion, innovation, increasing content discoverability, and reaching a larger audience. If you're not convinced, there's another reason: legal requirements. The Americans with Disabilities Act prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities. I worked on a case called National Federation of the Blind versus Script. Script is a digital library, and Script argued that because their library is online, they don't have to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. We argued, yes, you do. And that case went to court, and the judge looked at the various arguments and held that online businesses are required to comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. So online businesses do need to look into accessibility and make sure people with disabilities can access services. There's more to the Americans with Disabilities Act, but that's one very important point that we need to share within Silicon Valley and make sure all tech companies know. There are lots of great reasons to choose inclusion, including business reasons that will help drive revenue, but there's also legal requirements. In terms of digital accessibility takes many different forms. One form is compatibility with screen readers. And I'm going to share a short video that explains how screen readers work. Next slide. A screen reader is a program that converts graphical information to speech or digital braille. The screen reader on the iPhone is called VoiceOver. VoiceOver also works on the Mac, iPad, and the Apple Watch. So when I'm using my phone, I use VoiceOver. VoiceOver can speak out loud and send information to the digital braille display.
News. Checking for news. National Geographic. Unread. World's largest rodents on lam from Toronto Zoo.
I'm panning right on the braille display using the advanced forward button. If I wanted to instead use hand gestures on the iPhone, I could flick right with one finger. To open an item, I can double tap anywhere on the screen.
Text size. Caption. Title. Title. World's large title. After escaping from the High Park Zoo in Canada, 2 capybaras have eluded capture by Jason Biddle. Published June 9. Most people do their best to avoid rodents of unusual size. But after a pair of capybaras escaped from Toronto's High Park Zoo on May alert. Gordon. Hi, I'm at the door. Sushi. Pot of food. Fish cake with swirl design.
My friend's at the door, so I'm just gonna let him know.
Close. Button. Reply. Button. Messages notification. Hang. In. There. I'm almost done with this demo. Send. Button.
VoiceOver has allowed me to access more information, news, mail, and messages, and it's also a way for me to know when friends are at the door. Thanks for watching. Bye. So that's an example of a screen reader. VoiceOver on Apple products is one screen reader. There's also screen readers that work on other platforms, Android, Microsoft, and those screen readers are called TalkBack, JAWS, WindowEyes, NVDA, and many others. So when you design products to be accessible with these screen readers, then blind individuals can access them. They can listen to the content, it'll read everything on the screen, or it'll output to a Bluetooth braille display or USB braille display. The braille display I have is one model. There are many different models, some smaller, some larger. So that's one example. Another form of accessibility is captioning. Make sure all videos have captions. This allows deaf individuals to access the audio content in video. It also helps a lot of hearing individuals. Sometimes hearing people want to be sneaky, and they don't want people to know they're watching a video. So they'll turn off the audio and watch the video using captions. So captions help the deaf community, and they also help the hearing community. Another example is assistive devices. A braille display is one form of assistive device. Another is called switch control. Some individuals have mobility disabilities and maybe are not able to use a mouse or a keyboard, and they'll use switch control or other similar alternative devices that connect with the computer and allow them to operate the computer. So designing with accessibility allows companies like LinkedIn to reach more individuals. There are guidelines online to help make this happen. The Web Content Accessibility Guidelines helps web developers make sure their services are accessible. On mobile products, there's Apple and Android accessibility guidelines. So that helps with making services accessible. These are some of the things that exist, but keep innovating. Keep thinking about new ways for people to connect and share information. LinkedIn has an accessibility team. Connect with the accessibility team. Ask about different questions you have whether you're not sure something is accessible or you know something is accessible and you want to help get feedback on how to make it accessible, work with the accessibility team here to help make that happen. And sometimes you'll find yourself coming up with new solutions. That'll help you, and it'll also help the larger community. Our goal is to make sure all services are accessible. I'm not a fan of separate services, separate websites, and separate apps for people with disabilities. Separate is never equal. We want to strive to have one service, one app, one website that everyone can use. It might be tempting to make an assumption that, oh, a blind person wouldn't use this, or a deaf person would never use this, but don't make those assumptions. Instead, strive to make everything accessible. A few years ago, I went to Beijing for the very first time. And when I arrived in Beijing after the long flight, I was exhausted, tired, and I wanted to immediately go to my hotel room and take a nap. Before I went to sleep, I decided to explore the room because it's Beijing and it was my first time in Beijing. And while exploring the room, I discovered a strange object. I was feeling it in my hand, trying to figure out what it was. It almost felt like a piece of fruit. And I wondered, should I taste it? I was very curious to figure out what it was, but not curious enough to bite into an unknown object. So instead, I got out my phone, took a picture, and texted it to a friend, asking, "What is this?" Next slide. It was dragon fruit. And I discovered I like dragon fruit. A lot of people would assume that blind people wouldn't use cameras and might think, oh, there's no point in making a camera feature accessible. But blind people do use cameras. We do upload photos to LinkedIn and other social media platforms. So make sure all services are accessible. You'll be surprised. Don't make assumptions about what people can or can't do. We'll surprise you. So strive to make every service, every feature accessible so that everyone can engage and use LinkedIn. Next slide. Plan for accessibility from the start. It'll save you time and it will lead to better design. Imagine someone building a skyscraper without thinking about accessibility. And after they've created the skyscraper, they go, I wonder when we should add an elevator. It's more costly and time-consuming to add an elevator after you've already created a building. Instead, it would make more sense to add the elevator into the designs and create the structure from the start with an elevator. Same principle applies in the digital world. Before you build new features, plan for accessibility. Again, connect with the accessibility team here in LinkedIn. And have individuals with disabilities also be part of the process of testing out features, providing feedback to ensure accessibility. There are guidelines, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, Apple and Android Accessibility Guidelines for making services accessible. The LinkedIn Accessibility team also has internal guidelines that everyone can tap into. Engage with the community. There are also organizations like the San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind, the National Federation of the Blind, that can help provide more testers to get outside feedback on how features are working and how accessible something is. People with disabilities have expertise and knowledge, and there are also engineers, programmers, designers with disabilities. Make them part of your team. increase hiring of people with disabilities. Having different perspectives at the table makes the team stronger. Diverse teams are stronger teams. Teach your colleagues about accessibility. Make sure everyone knows about the reasons for choosing inclusion. You reach more people, you help with content discoverability, you drive innovation, and you meet legal requirements. Next slide. I'm sharing a video from the City Museum in St. Louis, Missouri. When I went to the City Museum, I had no idea what to expect. There's a vertical obstacle course that goes about 4 stories high, and I climbed the obstacle course in the video. I can't see the path. My friend is filming, unable to provide descriptions of what to expect. But I'm not afraid of the unknown. The unknown can be exciting. Exploring leads to new discoveries. Embracing your inner pioneer can lead to many amazing discoveries. So don't be afraid of the unknown. The unknown is scary for as long as you let it stay unknown. So keep exploring, be creative, find innovative solutions, and help make your team stronger. Next slide. So this slide has my contact information. My website is habengirma.com, and I'm also on LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, and email address is contact@habengirma.com. We're going to open up for questions and answers. And for questions, we're going to have a keyboard to the right of the stage from the audience's perspective, and people can come up and type their question. Don't worry about spelling and grammar. I won't reveal your typos. I'll read what you type out loud so the audience can also know what you're saying. So if you have a question, come on up to the front, type on the keyboard, and I'll be able to give you an answer. Hi, it's Margaret. I'm the Global Communications Lead for Enable In. 2 questions for you. Where do you like to salsa dance? I love salsa dancing at a place in San Francisco called SF Mambo. It's a great community, and it's a lot of fun to hang out with people and dance. Awesome. We got the easy one out of the way. Uh-oh. Thank you so much, Haben, for being here today and being a valued partner for us at Enable In. Brendan mentioned some of the great work you're doing. Meeting our executives. Let's talk about disabilities. Ensuring our tools are accessible. As you know, at LinkedIn, our vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. Typing fast, sorry, no problem. In order to do, we need to create an inclusive environment and encourage our employees to participate in the conversation. Can you share some examples of technology that has been successful in engaging folks on the conversation about disabilities. So social technologies help engage people, and LinkedIn is a great example of something that helps people learn about new ideas, from job opportunities to business strategies. And when people share those ideas on LinkedIn, others get to see that and may be inspired to take action and do something. Knowledge is empowering. So the more information we share, the more we can get people to act and move towards inclusion. So it would be great if everyone could share one thing you plan to do to make LinkedIn more accessible and more inclusive for everyone. One thing that you, yourself, in your position in LinkedIn can do to work towards inclusion. And I believe LinkedIn has a post on the news feed. A company post will go up today to ask the same question about making LinkedIn more accessible. Excellent. So if everyone can commit to doing one thing and share what you plan to do, that'll help inspire other people to also take action and do something. We all have to be advocates. We all have to represent the change we want to see in the world. So thank you in advance for doing that. Thank you so much, Haben. Sorry for the typos. You didn't have to tell them. Hi, Haben. It's Rochelle. Hi, Rochelle. As I mentioned, we have questions coming in from other employees on the stream. So I want to ask one to you. Go for it. This is from David Lee. My dad has glaucoma, is losing his vision. What advice would you recommend to help create new meaning, hope, recreational activities to combat depression? It's really helpful to stay engaged. So try to encourage your father to get out in his community and stay engaged in his community. Often it's tricky when you're transitioning and developing a new disability because there are so many alternative techniques that you don't know about. So taking the time to learn alternative techniques is also helpful. Everything from how do you pour water if you can't see? There's a technique for that. How do you get to your doctor's appointment on your own if you're blind? There's a technique for that. There are training centers that'll help provide this training. If your dad could take the time to learn these techniques, that would be incredibly helpful in feeling empowered and gaining independence. Some places, it depends on where your dad is. San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind provides some training. There are also training centers all around the US. So if you could share that with your dad, that'd be really helpful. Thank you. Hi, Haben. I have a disability, so I'm getting assistance typing. Are you voicing, or would you like me to voice?
Thank you, that's a lot easier. My name is Haben Cohen, and I'm a disability health policy consultant and an invited guest here today. I feel like similar to LinkedIn that connects people to the world and each other, we have a lot of people we know in common. So I am good friends with Sid Lewinsky and Larry Parodies before he passed away at DRA, as well as Alice Wong and many others from the disability community. So it's exciting to actually get to meet you today.
To meet you too.
I wanted to ask, you spoke so well about all the progress our community has made over the last several decades. And at the moment, our community has never been more under threat. So I wanted to know, in your opinion, how can companies like LinkedIn support our community in protecting the progress we have made?
LinkedIn is a way to share information. So if LinkedIn can make an effort to share more stories about disabilities, what are the challenges that we all need to address? What are the steps we can take to make our communities more inclusive? What are legislation and changes that we should be aware of? Like net neutrality, that affects everyone. So if LinkedIn can continue to share information, spotlight disability stories, provide multiple perspectives, when you have reviews and summaries, include the disability perspective and remind other companies to also make their services accessible. So those are some of the things LinkedIn can do.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was hoping you would say.
You're welcome.
Thanks for the really inspiring and insightful and informative talk, Haben. My name is Krishna Ram. I wanted to highlight yet another benefit of having accessible features. This is my recollection from a talk by Raj Reddy that I heard several years back. Raj Reddy is a professor at CMU, and he's a recipient of the Turing Award for his pioneering work on AI and robotics. So the context of this was he was referring to assistive technologies, especially for the blind, and he made a remark that instead of thinking as accessibility features just for the blind, think of it as features that can potentially reach out to what he calls as 3 billion people at the bottom of the pyramid. He says that most of these people are semi-literate, which means they cannot read or write or understand any language and cannot use keyboard or touch-based computing apps. And he advocates that for such people, if you think of the audience as such very large, almost half the size of the world's population, assistive technologies, especially like voice-based assistive technologies, can be extremely helpful. Thank you.
There are lots of different ways to think of the disability community. It's very, very diverse. There are people who've had limited opportunities, and then there are people who've had amazing opportunities. And the thing is, this is the largest disability group, and it's a group that anyone can join at any time. So it's not really us and them. It's all of us. Our bodies constantly change. We're constantly changing, especially as we grow older. And we deserve dignity and access at every stage of life. So when you choose inclusion and you design your services to be accessible, you're also doing it for you, for your future self, or your current self if you have a disability. But we all change. Disability touches all of us. And when you design services to be accessible, you reach a much larger audience, which means more business, more revenue in the long run. Last question. Hi, Haben. I'm Sunil. I work on this job-seeking team. Thank you for coming. Your presentation was better than most at LinkedIn. Definitely mine. One question. How is it better than most? I don't need to judge the other presenters. However, I have had a lot of practice, not just practice giving presentations, but also theater classes, public speaking classes. I've been doing public speaking since I was about 15. I went to Mali to help build a school. And when I came back from Mali, part of my responsibility was to teach the other students at the high school about Mali, about education in developing countries. And I gave 12 different presentations throughout my high school to different classes. And first it was terrifying, but after a while it became easier. So I learned through a lot of practice. I also work really hard to connect with an audience. I can't see the audience. I can't hear the audience. So I've developed an alternative strategy for gaining access. That is working with a team, working with Corey, Margaret and Rochelle and Brendan and I did a practice run through beforehand. So what you're seeing is a lot of practice and preparation. And we can tell those future speakers at LinkedIn to practice and prepare. To clarify, it's not that LinkedIn presenters are bad. You're just so damn good. Thank you, Sunil. So that was our final question. Afterwards, we're going to have an opportunity for people to ask additional questions in the back of the room. So if you still have questions or you want to do a photo, feel free to do that. And Brendan's going to come up.
Well, I think there's no question we're all going to leave here with some new perspective. I know there's things that I've learned here today that the good news is I think I can start implementing the second I walk out of this room. But thank you so much for your time. It's been a truly inspirational talk, and we're looking forward to continuing the relationship with you, Haben. So another big round of applause for Haben.
And remember, if you feel inspired, take that emotion and allow it to fuel action. Everyone needs to commit to one thing to making LinkedIn more accessible. Thank you.